Hi, I'm Iain Murray. I'm Vice President for Strategy at the Competitive Enterprise Institute here in DC.
Okay. And I understand that you have a fairly good understanding of what's going on in Europe. Can you give us a brief summary of what happened during the European elections?
Well, there were a bunch of elections last week. They started off with the British local elections and the mayoral elections in London, and then they went to the French presidential elections on Sunday, and also on Sunday, Greek parliamentary elections. In all of these, except for the mayoral election in London, the voters returned leftist candidates, or candidates who could not be regarded as free marketeers on the right, like conservative, pro-Russian groups in Greece.
And could you attribute that to the fact that when you have big government, they take away the money from the people and use it against them in their political organizations and get out the vote?
Absolutely. There's a feeling in Europe that money that is taken away from the people and used by government is not somehow connected back to the people. It's government money which you are therefore entitled to as a citizen of the country. The welfare mentality is really deeply ingrained in Europe.
Now, you mentioned something about David Cameron and his sort of giving up on free markets and austerity. Austerity meaning actually net cutting government. And yet it seems to me that nobody in Europe has really cut spending.
No, indeed. In fact, Veronique de Rougy of the Data Centre has got the real data on this, and you find out on National Review Online. There's been no spending cuts in the big economies like France and Britain, where supposedly voters were reacting against savage spending cuts. That just hasn't happened. There have been minimal spending cuts in Italy and small spending cuts in Spain and Greece. Those mainly as a result of shrinking GDP and just the inability to afford.
So economically speaking, when we're looking at places like Greece, they simply haven't cut enough to allow the private sector to build capital.
Absolutely not. And in fact, what's happened
is much less defend themselves against the political class.
Absolutely not. And what's happened is that the Greeks have actually voted for groups that want to confiscate more of that wealth. And that's a big problem, and that's going to lead to Greece leaving the euro.
Okay, so let's talk about the economics of it. My understanding is a lot of these failing states or countries are saying, we want you to monetize this debt. But it's my understanding that the Germans, after World War II and the Weimar Republic and printing all the money, the nightmare that came from that, they're saying absolutely not. So Greece and Italy and Spain and France even, they're basically voting to say, yes, we want you to do that. Well, ultimately, what will Germany do? Will they say absolutely not and we're on our own?
Well, that's the great question. Is Germany still committed to the European project, which, if, as David Cameron, for all his faults, he actually said this yesterday, if you're going to have a political, a monetary union, you need a fiscal union and you need a political union, and that will mean Germany paying for the early retirements of everybody in Greece, Spain, Portugal and France. The Germans do not want that as a people. However, they have historically been committed to the European project. The European project seems to be going inexorably in this direction of Germany paying for the rest of Europe. So the question is, will the German people stand for that, or will they break from the European project?
But isn't that akin to a lifeguard embracing, if you will, a man who wants to take somebody under who's drowning? I mean, it's sort of like putting yourself in peril in a union that doesn't quite work.
That's absolutely the case. And this is where we may be saved from the machinations of political leaders by certain elements of the of the German constitution and the rules of the German Bundesbank, which may put a constitutional stop on this process.
What's the risks of the American people ending up bailing out these absolutely irresponsible states and countries like Greece?
That's quite considerable. The European Central Bank is looking for more funding. It's massively increased its balance sheet. It's going to be looking for more funding. It's going to be going to other central banks around the world. So in all probability, the Federal Reserve will probably be asked to pony up something.
So you are anticipating that if Greece had to go through another cycle of elections because they couldn't form a government, they couldn't agree to actually be responsible, that even more leftists would then be elected.
Yes.
Why do you think that?
Because the Greeks believe somehow they can have their massive welfare state and stay in the euro, which is impossible. the radical leftists are telling the people that they can do that.
Right.
And in the end, in all probability, this will lead to a disorderly exit of Greece from the euro. The contagion will then spread. Spanish banks are very heavily invested in Greece. They will suffer. French banks are heavily invested in Spain. They will suffer. There will be a massive banking collapse in Europe if this happens.
And wouldn't there also be a contagion to America, for instance, because now the market knows with certainty that people will default on sovereign debt, will go into default, and hence that exposes us to accelerating interest rates, which have an immediate negative effect on our ability to pay for enumerated powers.
Absolutely, and in the end, if the euro does collapse or teeters on the brink of collapse, the American economy will be dragged down. This could easily happen over the summer.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for, I won't say good news, but at least a good update.
Well, there's never any good news from Europe these days.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.